welcome and thank you for watching the video. Before we get into it, please make sure you take a second to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and if you have something nice to say, please leave a comment. Now let's get into it. Happy Monday. So I told you a few seconds ago, is there a little tidbit, a little story, a little something that the world doesn't know about you from what's already out there?
Yes. Believe it or not, and no one knows this, I've never used an ATM machine in my life.
Really?
Never. I've never used an ATM machine, and when I go to a bank, they say, "What's your PIN number?" I say, "PIN for what?"
Really? And
never. I've never had to use a cash machine ever in my life.
so I guess the obvious question is, then how do you get cash, or do you never touch cash, or do you?
No, I touch cash all the time. Like if people owe me money, I tell them, pay me cash, right? If I'm betting on a golf course, pay me cash. Anything. If I buy season tickets for a sporting event and I share them with someone, pay me cash, player.
Oh, so then basically it's just the people that are giving you cash is how you have a little bit of cash.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow. And so you've never in your whole life, ever?
Never. I've never approached an ATM machine ever.
Do you know what you would do if you got to an ATM machine?
I'm sure I could sort my way through it, but I've gone this far, so now it's kind of my thing.
So
I was just telling a girlfriend of mine that about a couple of weeks ago. I said, I've never used a cash machine ever in my life. She goes, that is one of the funnest facts I've ever heard about you.
Wow. Do you even know your PIN code if you had to?
I don't have one. I don't even have one.
They don't even ask you to establish one when you have a bank account, or no?
No.
Wow. That is definitely, I mean, we do a bunch of different episodes. That's the first time I've ever heard anything in that ballpark. But
so for me, like when I do my banking, so I have fancy a private banker. So whenever I do a wire transfer or anything like that, they have to physically call my digits. They have to call my phone. They have to get a verbal command from me.
Wow. Very cool. Yeah, I mean, that's, I guess, the way to do it. So there's so much I want to get into, but I guess, you've said the story a bunch of times, but I guess for my listeners, for people who aren't familiar with you, just a brief background, I feel like it would do you more justice to have you kind of talk about your life rather than have me do it. So just a brief background on, how you got to where you are today. So for the listeners that aren't familiar with your story.
Yeah, I'll give you my 2-minute elevator, right?
Beautiful.
My 2-minute elevator. So I grew up youngest of 7. I have an identical twin, youngest of 7 kids. I grew up in a small town in the Midwest. And we were just a normal middle class family. My dad had a grocery store in a small town. And the one thing that my father gave me, the gift that he gave me at 8 years old, was the opportunity to work. So at a very, very young age, I learned accountability and responsibility. And for that, I'm grateful. I had no idea that some of the life lessons I learned as a child would be very prevalent today in the way that I roll, the way that I behave. So there's many things that I'm grateful for. I had an opportunity to turn around a failing health club in my hometown. This is in my early 20s. That was my big break. And so I had the opportunity to turn around. They never put a ceiling on how much. They allowed me to have some equity in the business. They never put a ceiling on how much equity I could acquire. And that was my big break. My big break was try to turn around a failing club. And by the way, if you do it, we will let you buy us out with the profits. That is a huge opportunity. So I did that for 20 years. And when I got to a point where I had enough where I could buy everyone out of the business, I really leveraged it, and I was fearless. I was fearless because when you're young and you start at the bottom, you're not afraid of the bottom, right? Because you've lived there. You experience that every day. So when everybody's saying, oh my gosh, you were all in, I didn't know anything other than all in, right? So I leveraged my one club, my dream. I leveraged that dream to have another dream. And I did that 7 times. At one point, I had 7 health clubs. I closed it. I sold them all. And then after about 6 months, I got right back in the trenches and I created a brand called STEELE Fitness. And that was the brand. I didn't have any partners. I used my own money to start it. I started STEELE Fitness with $300,000. And I had made that from when I sold my other clubs. And I built it into a $200+ million company in 15 years. And I've got roughly, I've since acquired and expanded and created other brands. But a long story short, I have about 6,000 locations either licenses or physical locations in 28 countries. I've built one of the largest wellness brands in the world, and I've made so many great relationships, great friendships, great life experiences along the way, and for that I'm eternally grateful.
Now, what would if you had told your 8-year-old self all these things, that it would lead to all of this, what would a young 8-year-old Peter Taunton have told me?
I would say, son, get yourself a helmet and a chin strap. It's about to happen. It's going to go down. Everything I've taught you up to this point, you're going to I would have had fun with it. I would just said, look, enjoy the journey. Number one. I mean, in all seriousness, if my father had told me, I wish he would have said, hey son, I know that you've got this ability to work really hard. You're really focused, but just make sure that you maintain balance in your life. Make sure that you take the time to dance. And that's something I talk about all the time, just metaphorically, when people say, Peter, do you have any regrets? And one of my biggest regrets is I wish I would have danced more. And I say that figuratively because I was so motivated. I was so driven, and it was almost from fear of loss, Felix. Sometimes when you start with nothing, you can't even imagine a life of being broke and poor and having this opportunity slip through your fingertips. It's that thought, for some people don't get it. Some people, when I say things like that, it sounds so profound. But when you know that you have a tether to a dream and it's yours to lose, I mean, you put an insurmountable amount of pressure on yourself to succeed. Now, it served me well. And now after winning, I can sit back and say, damn, I do wish I would have danced a little bit more, but I probably wouldn't have got where I am today without it, if that makes any sense.
Right. And were you able, during, I guess, the growth mode or the growth stages, to find balance? And then how did maybe finding your balance then, how was it different than how you find your balance now?
Well, did I find balance? Absolutely. But you know what? I only found balance when the work was done. Okay. So I never let work get in the way of it. And I'm not talking about work as it relates to opportunity, chasing another opportunity. That's a whole different perspective. When I talk about I made sure I was done with the work, I held myself accountable to making sure that the work was done, that the emails were answered, that the phone calls were answered, that I delivered on my promise to the thousands of franchisees that I have out there around the world. Because you know what? They're paying me their hard-earned money, and I have to make myself available. Once you make that flip, where instead of investing for yourself, people are investing in you. Once that happens, there's a whole new level of accountability that you better hold yourself to.
And how do you learn about that new level of accountability? And, then, because you go from, I guess, a little bit of pressure more on yourself to then pressure from thousands, or you feel, responsible and accountable for thousands. How do you, how did you, I guess, during those stages of growth, learn that accountability and learn how to deal with it and manage people, really?
Well, excuse me, at an early age, my father all the time, and my dad was always one of those guys where if you were driving with him, he had this van that he used for deliveries for his grocery store. And sometimes he would say, who wants to go for a drive? Well, that would be his moment to have your undivided attention. And now keep in mind, there wasn't cell phones and things like that. And my father always talked about character, and how do you want to show up, right? And making decisions, sometimes making decisions when you don't follow the pack, you thin yourself from the herd. So for me, hearing my father's words literally weekly, I mean, it was to the point, by the time I was a teenager, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to hear the character speech again, right? But today, as an adult, I talk about it all the time. I talk about it in these podcasts. I talk about it with friends. I talk about it with my children. I say, look, how do you want to show up? Because that's a choice that you get to make. How do you want to show up every day? When people look at you, what do you want them to see? When they're talking about you when you're not in the room, what do you want to hear? And that level of accountability and character is saying, look, I hope people say, you know what, he's a stand-up guy. He'll give you the shirt off his back, but make no mistake about it. Don't mistake kindness for weakness.
Now, what do you think you would be doing if you hadn't had that, I guess that first opportunity in that health club way back when? What do you think life would have looked like? Or what did you hope life would have looked like as a young kid? I mean, I know there's that, and I forget which podcast. I think it was with Dr. Bill Dorfman. You talk about, closing your business statistics book and being sick of school. But I don't know, what did you imagine life would be if it weren't for this?
I always felt, Felix, that I had the ability to lead people. And, leading people, when people say, oh, you're a leader, look, you can't just call yourself a leader. A leader is a result of people wanting to follow you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, because you can't lead as a dictator. You can't drag people along. You've got to have a certain level of passion in whatever it is you do in your life, and passion is contagious. So you have to have a certain level of passion. You have to have a certain level of vision. You have to have a certain level of compassion and patience for those people who follow you, and they think they understand your vision, but they don't quite get it with the same enthusiasm that you do, because maybe they don't fully understand it. So you have to be patient. And then at the end of the day, gratitude for those that do. I talk about it all the time. I may have built one of the largest wellness brands in the world. Make no mistake about it. I had the ability to stand on the shoulders of some amazing people who happen to have that same passion and share in the same vision that I did. So what do I think I would be doing? I don't know. I think I would be leading people only because I'm a really passionate guy. And as I said earlier, it's contagious. So I think I would have been providing some sort of a service or some sort of a business where I'm in front of the people, delivering some product.
And where do you think that passion comes from? I've heard you talk about it in, multiple different interviews, but do you think it's because, your dad built you with this kind of character? Do you think that you were just naturally always passionate about things you were doing? I mean, where do you think it stems from?
Yeah, I can't. Certainly my father had something to do with it. And I have an identical twin. I don't know if I told you that.
Right.
An identical twin. And he and I were unbelievably competitive with one another. So, when you're a twin and you grow up in kind of a small town, you're a little bit of an anomaly anyway. So people are curious about you, right? So you're not shy for the most part, even though when I grew up, I was very shy. But once I got into sports and was an athlete and then became a really good athlete, you start getting accolades, and with accolades comes confidence. And pretty soon, when you're not believing in yourself and other people are believing in you, pretty soon you wake up one day and you say, you know what, I am that person, and you own it, right? When I was 5, 6, 7 years old, I was a shy little kid. I was shy. I was the forgotten one, youngest of 7. My parents were over us. I mean, they were spent, right? So I was a shy kid, and my twin was the same way. But we came out of our shell as we excelled in athletics, and then obviously excelling in business. You can't be bashful. You can't be shy and run companies. You got to walk into a room and you have to own it.
And how do you, to give advice to people that are unable to, or not unable, but struggle with, walking into a room and owning it? Do you have any best piece of advice for people who need to kind of learn how to take that stand and, I guess believe in what they're saying when they're walking into a business meeting or something of that nature?
Yeah, you know what? I do a lot of consulting right now, and I sense a lot of people, their demeanor is really submissive. All right, and I tell them, look, here's the difference. If I'm walking in, when I'm at my international franchise convention, make no mistake about it. When I'm there, I know what I'm there for. I'm like a game show host, and nobody wants tired Peter. Everybody wants Peter on fire. Okay. And that's because that's what my brands represent. So I have to be that. But on the other side of it, if I'm going out for dinner with a girlfriend or hanging out, believe me, you're going to find me in the corner, quiet, chilling, having a margarita or whatever, right? So I know when I have to have my place. So I try to convey that to people. Look, understand that balance. You don't want to be that type A personality where every time you go somewhere, you're the loudest in the room and your hair's on fire. That person gets really tiresome to be around. But you got to know when it's your turn to shine. And believe me, when you walk into a room or when you're doing a podcast or when you're asked an opinion or your perspective on something in a business setting, I tell you what, you got to stand up tall and you got to give it to them straight. And don't be afraid what everyone around you is thinking. Own your decisions.
Now, I'm also curious, during those, I guess those growth stages in the beginning, is there something that you wish you had known then that you now know now that would have maybe saved you time or efforts or money or all the above?
For sure. For sure. I mean, I can tell you one in specifically, and I'll do it in a second here, but I will tell you that those experiences, that some of them that you wish you didn't have to have, that's part of it. I mean, every successful person that you'll meet, and when I'm talking about successful, I'm talking about real financial success, every one of us will tell you that all of our growth came through times of adversity. All of our growth came through times of challenge. Like what we're going through right now, COVID, where you are forced to pivot your business model. You will pivot or you will die. Mm-hmm. So you get to these moments, and it's not for the faint of heart. Some people sit at home wringing their hands thinking, oh my God, I'm going to lose my business. Others, they spit in their palms and say, look, we have got to put our heads together and we've got to find out a new value. How do we deliver exceptional value to our customers in this new business climate that's been put upon us? So that's there's a lot of meat on the bone there, but you understand what I'm saying.
And I mean, speaking of COVID, I guess right off the bat, how has that kind of, how have you adjusted with this new normal, new world, and, managing expenses, managing businesses? I mean, you have multiple. What's that process and that, thing been like for you?
Well, the good news is that we're all in it together. Right. And I've experienced, major catastrophic events. In 2003, the dot-com crash, right. All right, that was a big deal. In 2008 and 2009, the financial crash, the real estate crash, and now COVID. COVID dwarfs the other two.
Really?
10x, yeah. COVID is a complete shit show, right? Because for the first time in our country's history, government is mandating that you shut your doors. So, the initial shutting of the doors, that was one component of it. That's my dog. Sorry. Yeah. That's so that was the one component of it. But then having to face the new reality of consumer behavior. And that's something, when you have a consumer facing product, your reality is whatever the consumer's perspective is. Okay. Mm-hmm. So their perception, their perspective is your new reality. So you need to pivot accordingly. So for us, now that our clubs are back open, keep in mind at one time we had 6,000 locations closed, that not out of business, but just closed. So now consumer comes back, you got to be really intentional on your cleaning. Okay, you can't make cleaning a secret. It used to be you cleaned your club after hours. Now you're intentional. You're wiping things down. As soon as people are done using it, you're over there wiping it off, because you want people to understand that you're taking COVID seriously. Right. And so giving them that level of comfort that you're serious about COVID and you're providing them a safe environment, that's step number one. So what does that do? It adds operating costs to your business model.
Right.
And then the other component is some people have gotten their head, I'm not going to go to the gym anymore, especially some of the group fitness functional training type products where people are 3 and 4 feet from each other running on treadmills, sweating, and they're going from station to station. Those models are really suffering today. Fortunately, my models are not suffering as much because they can choose their time, the convenience factor, the flexibility factor. It really suits COVID well. But still, I feel bad for everyone out there, everyone in the health club space, in the restaurant hospitality space. Every one of us has had to pivot to some extent, and some will survive, many won't, and that's the sad part.
And so you're confident that in terms of survival, at least, you're okay and that it's manageable. And I mean, I don't know, have you seen since the reopening, what's that been like, I guess, from the inside, really? I mean, are people coming out as much? Have memberships drop? Yes. I mean, what's that like?
Well, we've had our memberships. We've had some membership attrition.
Yeah.
We think that they're coming back. So we believe that they're going to come back, just because it's people want to exercise. Exercising at your home, you can only do that so long, and pretty soon you get tired of it. So people are coming back to the gyms, and ours, we've had some attrition. Our member visit counts, we're about 75 to 80% of what we were pre-COVID. Now that varies depending what part of the world you're talking about, but so they're backed to an extent, but the revenues are not back to where they were. We're seeing some new signups from people we normally wouldn't see because people are leaving the big box gym. People are leaving the discount players where you've got heavy membership density, and they're saying, look, I'll pay a little bit more, but I know that I'm going to be in a safer environment, and I can't put a dollar figure on my health.
Right. Now, for you also, I'm also curious because I know you're involved in a lot of different brands. How do you gauge when you want to invest, perhaps start a new company, start a new product? What's that process like? I'm more curious about the internal conversations. Is there one or two people you always go to talk about these things with? Is it mostly just you? I mean, what's that whole process like? I mean, I know you have a new CBD company, for example, that came out that you just started, which is very exciting. Take us through, I guess, the behind the scenes of how these things come together.
Well, when you put yourself out there as an entrepreneur, and if you've experienced unbelievable success, so my profile is very public, so people are aware that I'm a 9-figure net worth guy. So there's no shortage of opportunity coming your way. Now here's the tricky part, Felix. I can tell you, I've never had a business presented to me where the financials are not up and to the right. Okay.
Right.
I mean, no one shows me a bad business plan. So I don't get emotional about that. I look at fundamentals. That's where I start with. Fundamentals, I look at how much capital has the founder, does the founder have in it, the person who's operating the business. So what is their capital? Because I'll be honest with you, I'm always a little skeptic when somebody comes to me with a business plan and they don't have any of their money in it and they own 40% of the company. To me, that's a bullshit deal.
Right.
All right. So to me, have your own skin in the game. Just like if someone comes to me with an opportunity, and this is a great lesson for some of you entrepreneurs that have had success and you're looking to divest in other things. Here's a moment of truth for people. Someone comes to you with a great idea, and I ask them, and the deal fundamentally sounds great. So I asked the founder, how much money are you going to put in? Well, he said, I don't have anything in. I'll ask them for their tax return. I'll ask them for their personal financial statement. All right. And I'll get them to a point where, let's say that the number is $100,000. He's going to put $100,000 in. I'm going to put $1 million in. But believe me, his $100,000, he's betting the farm. Right. All right. So he's the one that's going to get up every day and run the company. I don't want an extra job. I don't want to do your job. Don't give me the reins and think that I'm going to grow your company into this $100-200 million company. I'm not going to do that. Right. I'm betting on the horse. I'm betting on you. I'm betting on your passion. I'm betting on your vision. I'm betting on your expertise within this space. But I'm going to make sure that you are fully vested, my friend, that if this thing goes south, that it's going to leave a bruise for you. It's not going to affect my lifestyle, but it's going to definitely affect theirs. I want them running their business with the same paranoia that I had when I was starting my company for the first time. There was no plan B. Failing was not an option. That's the kind of fire that I look for.
Now, what kind of, other than that kind of fire, I guess character traits do you look for when you're, working with different business partners? Or is there one that stands out the most for you?
Yes. They're a rational thinker. Okay. They're rational and they're practical. They understand the meaning of bootstrap. Okay. It always brings me a high level of concern when somebody says, yeah, we need to go raise $3-4 million. And I'll tell them, look, you got to build your revenues up a little bit first, because when you go out to raise capital, believe me, that first amount of capital that you raise is going to be the most expensive capital you will raise, because right now you're still trying to fundamentally prove out your business. Be patient, grow your business. Let's get to a point where we have some real value on the company. And then when we need to raise money, let's make sure that we've got a good purpose for that capital. Because in some cases, think about Snap Fitness. When I started Snap Fitness, I started it with $300,000. I never had to go raise capital. The first time that I sold a portion of the company, I did it for pure liquidity, because, and I talk about this all the time, as an entrepreneur, you're going to create a concept, you're going to execute on your vision, and you're going to have some level of an exit where you can take some chips off the table. So in my case, after starting the company in 5 years, I sold 40% of the company for $47 million.
And that other 16% was the same amount.
You got it. Yeah. And for me, another 5 years later, but for me, the first time that I did it, that was the fiduciary accountability to myself, because I knew at that point my life was never going to be the same. Okay. It was never going to be the same. I was not going to bet the farm. Some people say, oh my gosh, Peter, why did you sell 40%? If you had held on to it, you could have made $80 million for 40%. I said, absolutely right. But the unknown. Right. I also could have been that guy. I talk to people all the time. They have a great idea. In 2 years, it turns on a dime. Suddenly, their $200 million company is worth $20 million. Yeah. I didn't want to be that guy. And I've got some stories of dear friends of mine that's happened to. I don't want to say names, but believe me, it's gut-wrenching for them. It's absolutely gut-wrenching.
Now, it's obviously very hard to know, again, the right time. But if you had to give a best piece of advice on when it's perhaps, or when you feel like it's perhaps the right time to take out a little bit, how do you gauge, for yourself when is quote unquote the right time?
Well, I think, the perfect time to get out of a company is when you're just getting ready to crescendo. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. If you could plan that, that would be the time to pull the chute. Okay. But for me, when I'm about halfway up that crescendo and it's a meaningful dollar amount, like for me with Snap Fitness as an example, I didn't want to sell 40% for $10 million. And don't get me wrong. It's not that $10 million is not a lot of money. It's a hell of a lot of money. Okay. But I had confidence that there was a lot of runway for me. So I wanted my timing. And when it got to the point where it was kind of stupid money, 47 million. All right, 47 million. That's a whole other league. Okay, and I promise you, for all the people out there with money, $10 million, that's one thing. But when you start getting over $20 million of cash, after tax cash, that's a whole nother level. And when you get over 50, that's another level. You get over 100, it's another level. All right, just make no mistake about it. All of them are great levels to be at, but those are different levels of your lifestyle and new levels of accountability. To me, I think if you got to a point where you get over X amount of dollars and everyone's different, that you've got a fiduciary responsibility to give back and give other people a leg up. Help them find the way to their financial freedom.
And I know that that's also something that you're very passionate about. You're involved in a numerous amount of different ways that you give back. One that I thought was very interesting is you're very, anti-poaching. That's something that you're passionate about, and you've made, I think, numerous trips, obviously, to Africa to be with the people there and to combat it, hands-on, on the ground. We just talk about those kinds of experiences and why anti-poaching was something that really, struck a chord in your heart.
Well, for me, I think it's important to understand where I came from and how I grew up. I grew up, as I said, a middle-class kid. I grew up in the country. I have a passion for animals and wildlife. I have a compassion for people. I never like to see people suffer. I always felt bad for the underdog. I always felt bad for the overweight kid on the playground, or the new kid that came into the classroom from moving in from another town, and everybody's staring at you. You're there. You're afraid. I always tried to befriend those type of situations because for some reason, I've just got that soft spot in my heart for people that way. And the same goes for adults today. When I see that they're a little bit lost, I try to help find their way. Now, when I go to Africa, that's a whole other level. Now we're talking about animals. And to me, I think it's so profoundly wrong when a 50-year-old, male elephant is just drinking water in the Serengeti, and some clown from 400 yards away plants one in the back of his ear, and he drops dead in his tracks. And then you drive up on him and you cut his tusks off as he sits there and rots in the sun for the next 30 days. But to me, it's just profoundly wrong. It's senseless. But the challenge there, it goes so much deeper than just the tusk or the guy shooting him. You got to go so far upstream, because the guy shooting him, he's just a local trying to put food on the table for his family. So there's a hell of a lot of education that needs to take place. But the whole point of it, in today's day and age, I can't for the life of me understand why we're still talking about ivory, why we're still talking about, senseless, inhumane treatment to animals. I honestly don't get it. To me, It's just like people talking about, the gay population. I scratch my head. I'm like, for real? That's what you're concerned about? Look, let people roll how they want to roll. But I don't get how some people take some of these positions. There's so many bigger battles to fight than people's sexual preference, or I just don't get it. I don't get some of these things, and obviously poaching is one of them.
Now, how does one, like yourself, a person like you, get involved in combating poaching? I mean, what's that conversation like? Do you have to find different partners that do X, Y, and Z out in Africa? I mean, how's that work?
Well, I own a lodge in the Serengeti. So I own a lodge just outside the Serengeti. It's called TASA, TAASA, TASALodge.com. And being in that business, we're very aware of poaching and what takes place across the Serengeti. And I speak with other lodges. There's another lodge out there that is called Singita, and they've got wardens, and they've got a huge initiative on anti-poaching. In fact, I was going to do a benefit concert to raise money for that specific group. I mean, to me, they're the poster child of really taking action on the ground of combating poaching. But it is literally like trying to stop a dam with your finger. It's it's a big problem. It starts with education, and it's a big uphill battle. So, but it's a fight worth fighting, and that's why with my foundation, the Peter Taunton Warrior Foundation, my tagline is "Fighting the Good Fight." And for me, fighting the good fight could be a number of things. It could be fighting the fight against anti-poaching. It could be fighting the fight against homeless and hunger. So I have different fights, different causes. I can't be everything to everyone, but the places that I do have passion for, I try to help where I can.
And where do you think that level of compassion also comes from? I mean, we talked about where your passion comes from, but in terms of compassion and caring about other people and caring about these different causes, I mean, is that something, you mentioned when you were younger, you always kind of felt bad for that kid who got bullied or the kid who was overweight or whatnot. But, did you ever experience any of those kinds of, any bullying or things that struck you when you were young that made you want to care for the underdog?
I didn't have any bully situation. Did I get in some fights when I was a kid? Of course I did. I was a fiery, young kid. But I was just always compassionate. I don't know where I got it from. And my twin brother's the same way. We're just really, really compassionate people. And that's something I've never apologized for. I mean, I can really empathize with people. I've got an incredible soft spot for people, right? Especially those that are going through hard times. So I don't know where it comes from, but I'm thankful that I have it. I think that is a gift that I'm a Christian, and I do believe that for those that have been given a lot, that a lot is expected. Right. So for me, my giving back is through my compassion to others. Obviously, some philanthropic donations here and there is obviously plays a part as well. But I just think that you've got to show up in so many different aspects of your life, and I think also, you can't be a one-man wrecking crew. That you've got to hopefully that compassion for others becomes contagious for others, and so you can kind of rally people to say, you know what, man. This is really doable, and you're showing me that it's doable. And I talked about this just a couple of months ago on a podcast, that when I was feeding the homeless, when I'm back home in Miami, I have this bike, and I bought this little trailer, and I have a deal worked out with some of the bakeries around Miami where I get day-old cookies and cupcakes, and then I buy a couple of cases of water, and I go into the hood of Miami, and I'm in there by myself, and some people think, Peter, you're crazy. You're going to get rolled one of these days. I've only been threatened a couple of times, but there's not a time that I haven't done that my heart is not completely full. And I remember talking about one time saying, you know what? I learned through that experience that the giving of my time is so much harder for me to do. Okay. Right. So now I really hold myself accountable to that. I say, Peter, don't just give money, because that's a cop out. Okay. Right. That's a cop out. Give of your time, give of yourself, because that's real giving. And, so that's just one thing that I do for myself, holding myself accountable, not taking the shortcut.
Now, it's also, I mean, I'm also curious, when you get to a high level of wealth, right? Is it isolating? I mean, I know you've said, money doesn't buy happiness, and a lot of people that are wealthy say the same thing. But is it isolating? Is it lonesome? Is it, how do you gauge that? I mean, then you're in like a group with other people, and it kind of separates you from the regular population, if you will.
Yeah, I'd say, you know what, I'll tell you a funny story. And I'm the hardest on myself, and I can laugh at myself harder than anyone, right? So is it isolating? It can be if you let it. Okay, there's no question that some people come up to you, and people are very smart. They'll approach you, pretending that they don't know who you are, and then you find out within 10 minutes of a conversation, they're telling you things about yourself, and then pretty soon here comes the big question. It's a company that they want you to look at, or so you see some of that, and after a while you get a little bit jaded to it. But you know what, if that's the biggest thing that you have to worry about by having financial success, big deal, poor little baby. Obviously you find your way through it. But the piece for me, so I'm a single guy, and it's funny for me because as I try to find the person to share my life with, and that is a big deal for me,
right?
Because you can have all these things, jets, yachts, fancy cars, and fancy trips. But if you're doing that without someone to share those memories and make memories with, it's a pretty freaking shallow existence, if I could be honest, right? Well, the problem is that when I meet someone who has the qualities that I'm looking for, because I can very quickly decipher if she's not for me, because she's entitled, she may be a complete smoke show, but she's a complete nutbag as well, right? So I get to that point very quickly. But when I meet someone who is beautiful and real, it's like a shiny penny. It's like I can't get enough of it. I can't hold it in my hand. You know what I mean? So I got to learn to control to curb my enthusiasm. You know what I mean? It's so friggin' hard. I laugh at myself, because I move at the speed of light. You know what I mean? When I find someone, because I can read people's heart very quickly, and when I see someone who's just genuine and like-minded and compassionate, and man, I tell you what,
Do you feel like it's harder to get a read on people when you're approaching it as it's, perhaps an emotional thing rather than, separating reading a business situation and reading a woman you might, spend time with? Do you feel like you're able to do both equally as well? Do you feel like, because it's a woman and it's more that's more challenging? I mean, how, you're a smart guy, so but when emotions are in it, we're all sometimes a little bit nervous or flustered or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I don't get nervous around beautiful women, but the challenge becomes, I think everyone. I know what I bring to the table. I know what I bring to the table in a relationship. Okay, let's just be real about it, right? I know. I'm beyond an age where I want to have children, right. But one of the things I can bring to the party is an amazing life. Okay, I can bring that, and I'm well aware of that, and I embrace that. So sometimes when I meet people, they're drawn to that potential lifestyle, and when I'm not feeling the same way, although they're a really, really nice person, sometimes they don't take well to being in the friend zone. Okay, right. I'm friend zoning them, right? If that makes sense, because it's not an all or nothing. I meet some amazing people and they're great, but they're not the fit for me to have a long-term monogamous relationship. And that's what I want. That's what I'm looking for. But I'm perfectly happy, and I don't have a gun to my head over it, but I look for that. And I think that all of us deserve love. So I just, I wait patiently for that amazing person that I can settle down with and ride off into the sunset, so to speak.
Do you feel like it's harder also because, you're a public figure and people and a woman knows you have money and have all the beautiful things that come with that? Do you feel sometimes that you have to have a barrier at first to try to, gauge whether or not it's, because they actually like you or because they like the lifestyle or what you have to offer financially, and they can look you up and see that you have millions of dollars? I mean, I could imagine that, it's hard. I mean, sugar babies exist. That's the reality.
Yeah.
And, I guess for someone like yourself, I'm wondering how you kind of gauge that, how you work with dealing with those different personalities and people, and ultimately, what's that experience been like?
You know what? I think just like in business, you have to pay attention to what's going on around you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So for me, when I meet someone and I think that there's potential there for it to go somewhere, I'm quietly observing, if they have kids, how do they treat their kids? How do they treat their ex? How do they treat their friends?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Who are their friends? How do they roll? I mean, if they're still at a point where they're clubbing it and they're running around with a lampshade on their head at night, that's not my jam. Okay. And believe me, I love to have a margarita as much as the next person on a sandy beach with friends laughing. I roll with that any day that ends in Y, right? But I'm never out of control, right? That's just not, and I've never been like that. So I just pay close attention. I like a woman who can be fun and adventurous and light, and not heavy, no drama. I mean, I don't think that's indicative. That's unique for what any person wants. And those that come up and they realize, the financial wherewithal that I have. I mean, that's just being realistic. I'm glad that they embrace it rather than try to pretend that they don't. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
All things being equal, and I say this to men and women all the time. All things being equal, the choice to be rich or poor, take rich. It's a hell of a lot more fun. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't ever apologize for being successful. I tell them, hey, look, it's a hell of a lot of work and a hell of a lot of risk, and a lot of sacrifice and discipline and all those things that come with it. But I wouldn't have changed it for the world, and I wouldn't change where I am today in my life for the world. I just know I'm very intentional. I have to be like that, just like I was in business. I'm very intentional about, one of the things that I want to have in my life is a significant other. I'm patient, but I don't want to be sitting. I don't want to spend the rest of my life. I don't want to spend the next 50 years single. I don't want to be a serial dater. That's just not me. And some of my friends think I'm absolutely crazy. Mm-hmm. They think I should be this playboy, jet setting around.
Dan Bilzerian type.
Yeah, right. And I follow Dan, right? I follow Dan, and sometimes it looks fun, and then other times it looks really empty. So.
Do you feel like you put a pressure on yourself to get that because you talk about it and because, that's how you feel? I mean, do you feel like, is it you putting a pressure on yourself? Is it the people around you? How do you gauge that?
You know what? That's a great question. I love that question. I have some friends in Miami that belong to a specific fraternity. We're all high net worth guys. Mm-hmm. And one of the things, when I talk about it, there's not a one of them, other than those that are married, but about half of them are single guys. Mm-hmm. with a lot of dough. And we all talk about the same thing, okay? We all have the same challenge, and I give them a unique perspective on it, right? So I'm vocal about it. People ask me, Peter, you're single. Why are you single? Well, I just haven't met the right person. Mm-hmm. There's a big difference between saying, I just haven't met the right person, or I'm never getting married again. And, I love this single thing where I'm dating one beautiful woman after another. Big difference between saying, look, I just haven't met the right person. That's an honest response, meaning I'm looking, and when she comes, when it's right, she will be there for me and I'll feel it.
And also, honestly, I really appreciate your honesty too, because I think it also puts into perspective, you could be rich and successful, but at the end of the day, we all just want the same things, the same. I could pull a person off the street and they'll tell me the same things that you're telling me from an emotional standpoint, right? So just to wrap things up, I'm curious, I don't know if you ever think about it, and hopefully, again, long years of healthy and successful life, but do you ever think about your legacy? How you hope to be remembered in the span of history?
I do. And I hope, you can never control what people say about you, right? You can just be you. So, but I hope that, the narrative around when my name comes up in conversation, I hope it's not, he was a hardworking, successful businessman. That comes with it. But I'm hoping the other side of it is, you know what, despite all of his success and all of its life experiences, he was a good father. He had a beautiful heart. He was compassionate to others, and he fought for the underdog every freaking day, right? And, you know, to me, that says a lot about your character, that you're a little bit of a cowboy at heart, that you've got grit. You're not going to turn and run. You're going to face any storm head on. And you know, you know, that's how I try to show up every day. And hopefully people appreciate it.
Beautiful. People can follow you on Instagram at Peter_Taunton. Your Twitter is the same, Peter Taunton, I believe. Your website is a great website, petertaunton.com. And Peter, truly a pleasure to have you. Hey, it was one thing that we didn't really go over, but I know you were a big racquetball player. I don't know, did you ever play tennis?
Well, I do, but I just batted around. In fact, it's funny because my oldest son played on the tennis team, and he would play me in tennis, and I would hit what you call a flat ball. Okay. So he puts all this top spin on it. And
you're more Eastern grip.
What's that?
You have the Eastern grip.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, more flat.
Yeah, I wouldn't even know. Okay. So first, I've never heard that, but it would drive my son crazy. So you know what? I'm athletic, so I can get the ball back over the net, right? But so I just play tennis a little bit. I'm probably just a middle class tennis player, but racquetball was my game for sure.
All right. Well, if you're ever in New York, first of all, I'd love to bring you in the studio one day, and you know, post COVID, of course, and you know, maybe play some tennis. I'm a tennis player, so I never played racquetball, but we'll see. But thank you again for taking the time. Truly a pleasure, honored to have you on my show, and I'm excited for what the future holds for you.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, brother. I appreciate it. I really enjoyed myself, and I'd be happy to come back anytime you have me.
Perfect. Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't done so already, please make sure you like this video and hit that subscribe button, and also follow me on Instagram at felix.levine to stay updated on all new content as it comes out.